My mother looked me in the eye, in front of 20 people, and told me the best Mother's Day gift I could give her was to disappear from this family. Then she dropped my handmade card in the trash. Didn't flinch, didn't hesitate, like throwing away something she'd never wanted in the first place. I've spent 28 years trying to be enough for that woman. I walked out the front door. Didn't cry, didn't argue, just walked. And 30 seconds later, halfway down Maple Street, a black limousine pulled up and stopped directly in front of me. The woman who stepped out of it? My mother hadn't seen her in 12 years, because my mother had told everyone she was dead. My name is Moira Calloway. I'm 28 years old. And this is the Mother's Day that changed everything. If you've ever been made to feel like the problem in your own family, you need to hear how this ends. Subscribe, and tell me where in the world you're watching from. Now let me take you back to 3 weeks before, to the phone call that started it all. I had just finished a 12-hour night shift in the ICU. Not the kind of shift where you sit at a desk and check charts, the kind where you don't sit at all, where you're on your feet from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., making decisions that matter, holding the line between one outcome and another. I'm a nurse. I've been doing this for 4 years. I'm good at it. I got home at 7:45 in the morning, peeled off my scrubs, and saw 4 missed calls from my mother. I stood there in my kitchen, still in my socks, and called her back. She picked up on the first ring. This year's Mother's Day is going to be bigger than last year's. No hello, no how are you. You need to be there, and don't show up empty-handed. I asked what she'd like me to bring. I don't know, think about it. A pause. Look at what your sister does, learn something. I checked my calendar. I was scheduled for a Sunday shift that day. I made the calls, rearranged 2 schedules, found someone to cover. It took most of the morning. Nobody from my family knew I'd done it, because nobody asked. No thank you came. I hadn't expected one. I set my phone down on the counter and noticed something I'd been turning over in my mind for weeks. My dad hadn't called me in over 2 months. That wasn't like him. Dale Calloway was a man of routine. Every Sunday, 10 a.m., he'd call from his office landline. We'd talk about nothing much. Weather, whatever game was on, how my car was holding up. The last time I saw his number, the call had cut off mid-sentence. The kind of cut-off that doesn't feel like a dropped signal. It feels like someone pressing a button. Let me tell you about my mother, so you understand what I mean when I say her words didn't surprise me. Sandra Calloway is 54 years old. She dresses well, keeps the house immaculate, and says, in our family, the way other people say, obviously. Like it's a fact that doesn't need defending. She has never, in my memory, raised her voice in front of company. She doesn't need to. She delivers her worst lines at a near whisper, and somehow that makes them land harder. When I was 16, I was in a car accident. Nothing life-threatening, but I lost partial hearing in my left ear. I was in the hospital for 3 weeks. My mother did not take a single day off work during that time. I'm not saying this to be cruel. I'm saying it because it's true, and because when Brittany chipped a nail 2 days before her rehearsal dinner, my mother drove 2 hours each way to sit with her at the salon. Brittany is my older sister. She's 32, married to a surgeon named Kevin Pierce, and doesn't work, though she'll tell you she's very busy. When Brittany looks at me, there's something in her eyes I've never found the right word for. The closest I've come is pity. Not unkind exactly, just certain. Like she's already decided how my story ends. Here's what I know now that I didn't fully understand then. This wasn't just favoritism. There was something calculated underneath it. Something with a direction. I know that because of something I'd half forgotten, until it started to matter. About a year earlier, I was in the kitchen at my parents' house when I heard my mother on the phone in the next room. Her voice was low, pressed down flat. I only caught one sentence before she moved away from the door. Ruth can't come back, you understand that. Aunt Ruth had been dead for 12 years. My mother had told us so herself. So who was she talking to? I want to be clear about something. I didn't keep going back to that house for my mother. I went back for my dad. Dale Calloway is 57 years old. He retired early, a heart condition that caught up with him faster than anyone expected, the kind that quietly rearranges your whole life before you've had time to argue with it. He can't drive anymore. He spends most of his days on the back porch with a mug of weak coffee, watching the yard. He was a man who used to fix things, wiring, engines, whatever needed doing. Now he mostly watches other things get fixed on television. Every time I visited, he'd find a reason to pull me out to that porch. He'd make 2 cups of coffee, the same thin brew he'd always made. And he'd ask about my patients, about my car, about whether I was sleeping enough. Small questions. But the way he asked them, slow and careful, like he was taking an inventory of my life so he wouldn't lose any of it, that meant something to me. About 2 weeks before Mother's Day, I stopped by unannounced. My mother was home. Dad came into the kitchen, saw me, and reached for the coffee maker without a word, the way people do when they're genuinely happy you're there. We sat down at the small table by the window. He started to say something. His hands were around his mug. "Moira, there's something I've been needing to..." My mother walked in from the hallway. "Dale, you forgot your afternoon medication." He looked at me. That apology in his eyes, I knew it. I'd seen it 100 times. He stood up. Before he went inside, he rested his hand briefly on my shoulder. "I'm still here," he said quietly, almost to himself. I sat alone at that table with 2 full cups of coffee going cold, and tried to remember the last time we'd finished a conversation. My best friend Celeste Morgan is 30 years old and works as a paralegal at a law firm in Columbus. She's the kind of person who notices things, the kind who, when you describe a situation, starts quietly noting the details that don't add up. I've known her since our first week of college, when we were both trying to find the same building in the rain and ended up sharing an umbrella and complaining about the campus map for 20 minutes. We've been close ever since. Over dinner, 2 weeks before Mother's Day, I told her about the phone call from my mother. Celeste put down her fork. "You don't have to go, Moira." "I know." "So why are you going?" I thought about it honestly. "Because if I don't show up, my dad will sit in that house by himself all day. He won't say anything. He never does. But I'll know." Celeste looked at me for a moment, then picked her fork back up. She didn't push. That night, I opened the drawer in my nightstand where I keep the things I don't want to lose. In the back, behind a folded birthday card and a spare key, was a photograph. My mother and me, taken in the backyard of the house on Maple Street. I was 5 years old, wearing a dress with yellow butterflies. My mother was laughing, actually laughing, her head tipped back, one hand reaching toward me. It was the only photo I had where she looked like she didn't know she was being watched. I built the card around that photograph. I cut the paper, folded it carefully, and wrote inside in my own handwriting, "I know we haven't been easy with each other, but I'm still your daughter." I showed it to Celeste before I sealed it. She read it twice. Then she said, "You're either very brave or very foolish. I haven't decided which." I laughed. But I also invited her to come with me on Sunday. "Just in case I need a witness," I told her. Half joking, only half. Brittany called me the day before the party. "You're coming tomorrow, right?" She said it the way you remind someone about a dentist appointment. Necessary, slightly inconvenient, but unavoidable. "Dress nicely. Mom invited the Hendersons and Patty Oaks. It's not a casual thing." I asked if Dad was doing okay. There was a pause, short but noticeable. "He's fine." She hung up. That phone call sent me back to a memory I'd been avoiding. 6 months earlier, I was visiting the house when I noticed a piece of mail on the hallway table. A standard white envelope, slightly worn at the corners like it had been in transit for a while. The return address was handwritten. R. Hargrove, Edinburgh, Scotland. Hargrove was my aunt's last name. Ruth Hargrove, my father's younger sister, who had been dead for 12 years. I picked up the envelope. My name wasn't on it. It was addressed to my dad. but my hand had barely closed around it when my mother appeared from the kitchen. She took it from me cleanly, without breaking stride. "That's your father's mail." She was already moving away. "It doesn't concern you." I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. But I remembered. And that night, before Mother's Day, I was going through my phone contacts. An old habit, the kind where you scroll and find people you've half forgotten, when I saw it. A number I'd saved when I was 15, 2 years before the accident, back when Aunt Ruth used to call the house every few weeks and sometimes talk to me directly. Aunt Ruth, landline, Paris. I stared at it. I hadn't called it in 13 years because I believed there was no one on the other end. I almost deleted it. Instead, I put my phone face down on the nightstand and tried to sleep. I arrived at 10 o'clock Sunday morning. The party wasn't until noon. I'd planned it that way deliberately. 2 hours before anyone else showed up, 2 hours where my mother would be busy in the kitchen and my dad might actually be left alone on the back porch long enough for us to finish a sentence. I parked on the street, walked up the front path. The tulips along the border were in full bloom, deep red and yellow, the kind my dad planted every fall without fail, because he believed in things that came back. He was on the back porch when I got there, sitting in his usual chair with a mug of coffee, watching the yard. When he heard the screen door, he turned, and his face did something that I've held on to ever since. Not surprise, not polite acknowledgement, something quieter than both of those, the expression of a man who had been waiting. "You came early," he said. "I wanted to see you before it got loud." He nodded. He poured me a cup from the small carafe he kept beside his chair. He'd made enough for two, which told me he'd been hoping I'd come early too. We sat. The morning was cool and bright. He turned the mug in his hands twice, a habit I'd known my whole life. "Moira." His voice dropped. "There's something I need to tell you. I should have said it a long time ago and The screen door swung open. "Dale?" My mother's voice was pleasant, almost cheerful. "I need you inside for a minute. The good tablecloth is stuck in the top cabinet." He looked at me. The apology in his eyes was the same one I'd seen 2 weeks ago, and the week before that, and the month before that. A long string of apologies that never got to become words. He stood, touched my shoulder once, went inside. I sat alone on the back porch with 2 cups of coffee and the sound of tulips doing nothing at all in the still morning air. By noon, the house was full. The Hendersons came first, Gary and Linda, the neighbors from 3 doors down, who had lived on Maple Street longer than anyone, and treated every neighborhood gathering like a civic duty. Behind them came Patty Oakes, my mother's closest friend of 20 years, carrying a dish of something wrapped in foil and wearing her good earrings. A handful of cousins and family acquaintances filled in the gaps. By 12:15, there were close to 20 people in the living room and kitchen, and my mother was moving through all of them like she'd choreographed it. She was wearing the blue dress she saved for occasions she considered worth witnessing. Brittany and Kevin arrived at 12:20 in a black SUV I didn't recognize, newer than the last one. Brittany stepped out holding a wrapped box with a gold ribbon. Kevin followed with his phone already in his hand. He nodded at me when we made eye contact. That was the entirety of our greeting. Celeste slipped in behind them. She'd dressed up slightly, a cream blouse, her hair pulled back. When she found me standing near the window, she read my face in about 2 seconds and didn't ask any questions. She just stood beside me. "Why does this feel like a performance?" she murmured. "Because it is," I said. My mother circulated. She laughed at the right moments, refilled drinks, mentioned Brittany's recently redecorated living room twice before the first half hour was up. She did not mention me at all. Patty Oakes caught my eye from across the room and gave me a small nod, the kind that might mean hello or might mean I see you. I couldn't tell which. Then my mother touched her water glass with a spoon, and the room settled. "I think," she said, smiling at everyone, "it's time for the gifts." The back of my neck went cold. Brittany stood up like she'd been waiting for her cue. which, I now understand, she had been. She carried the gold-ribboned box to my mother with both hands, setting it down on the coffee table with a kind of deliberate care, the way you place something you know will be admired. My mother made a small sound of anticipation. Brittany smiled. Inside the box was a necklace, diamond pendant, heart-shaped, set in white gold, the kind of piece you don't stumble across, the kind you order specifically, after consideration, because you want someone to know exactly how much it cost. My mother lifted it from the tissue paper and held it toward the window light. The room responded the way my mother had designed it to respond. Linda Henderson leaned forward. Patty Oakes put her hand to her chest. Two cousins took out their phones. Kevin helped me pick it out, Brittany said, though Kevin was looking at his own phone. My mother turned around so Brittany could fasten the clasp. Then she faced the room again, necklace at her collarbone, posture perfect, and said, "My daughter knows exactly what her mother likes." Not looking at anyone in particular, looking at everyone. The applause was light but genuine. A few people said it was beautiful. It was beautiful. I was standing near the far wall, holding the card in both hands. My mother let the moment settle, let it peak and hold, and then she turned her eyes toward me. Not a natural glance, a directed one. "And Moira," she said. Her voice was even, conversational, carrying just enough for the room to hear. "What did you bring?" 20 people looked at me. I stepped forward. I held out the card. My mother took it. She opened it without ceremony, the way you open something you've already decided about. She looked at the photograph inside, looked at the handwriting, looked at the photograph again. 2 seconds, maybe 3. Then she set it in the trash can beside the end table, the same way you'd discard a used napkin. No hesitation, no explanation. I stood there with my hands still slightly extended. The room went quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of a moment between words, the other kind. The kind where 20 people stop breathing at the same time and nobody knows where to look. Linda Henderson looked at her husband. Gary Henderson looked at the floor. Patty Oakes looked into her coffee cup and kept looking. My mother straightened up. She looked at me the way she sometimes looked at a piece of furniture that had been placed wrong. "The best gift you could give me," she said, "would be to disappear from this family." Clear, unhurried. Like something she had been meaning to say for a long time and was relieved to have finally gotten out. The room was still silent. I looked at the trash can. At the edge of the photograph inside it, the one of her laughing in the backyard, her hand reaching toward a 5-year-old version of me in a yellow butterfly dress. The only picture I had of her looking like she loved me. "Go," she said, "before you ruin the mood." Celeste had risen from her chair. She was looking at me, not at my mother, just at me. I said, "Okay." 2 words. That was all. I turned, walked to the front door, opened it, and stepped outside into the May sunlight. I didn't look back. Maple Street was quiet. It was just past noon on a Sunday in May, and the neighborhood looked exactly the way it always looked. Neat yards, the sound of a lawnmower somewhere 2 blocks over, someone's wind chime moving in a small breeze. The tulips along my parents' front path were still doing what tulips do. Nothing had been disturbed. I walked, not fast, not slow. The way you walk when you're trying to hold yourself together from the outside in, when you're concentrating on the feeling of pavement under your feet, because that's the one thing you're certain of right now. Behind me, I heard the front door open again. My mother's voice. "The party isn't over." Celeste's voice. "I think it is. For me." Then footsteps on the path. Celeste didn't run to catch up. She just fell into pace beside me, close enough that our arms were almost touching. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Inside the house, I found out later, my father had stood up from his chair. He'd gotten as far as 2 steps toward the front door when my mother turned from the window and said, "Sit down, Dale." Not cruelly, not loudly, just 2 words, The same 2 words she had been using for years. And because he had heard them so many times, in so many rooms, his legs responded before his mind could argue. He sat down. He pressed his hands flat on his knees. He stared at the floor. He had been trying to stand up for me his whole life. The tragedy was that he'd been taught to sit down so thoroughly that standing had become an act that required everything he had. I was about half a block away when I heard the sound of a car. Not just any car. The limousine was black, long, and entirely wrong for Maple Street. It slowed as it reached me and stopped, not at the house, not at the curb down the road, directly in front of me, like it had been looking for me specifically. The rear door opened. A woman stepped out. 60s maybe, though the way she carried herself made age feel beside the point. Silver hair cut short and clean. A navy blazer over a silk blouse. Reading glasses pushed up over her forehead. Around her neck, a strand of green stones that caught the light. She moved the way people move when they have long since stopped needing anyone's approval. She looked at me. And something in her face, the line of it, the particular stillness, pulled at something old and far back in my memory. "Moira," she said. I stopped walking. That voice. That name in that voice. I knew it from somewhere that predated almost everything I could currently name. "Aunt Ruth?" She crossed the distance between us in 3 steps and put her arms around me without asking. I stood there in the middle of Maple Street with my arms at my sides for one suspended second. And then I held on. Behind us, I heard footsteps on the porch. My mother had come outside, probably to watch me go, or to make sure I was going. She was standing at the top of the porch steps when she saw the woman holding me. I heard Celeste draw in a sharp breath. I turned just in time to see my mother's face go white. And then her knees gave way. Gary Henderson moved first, catching her arm. Linda was right behind him. My mother sank onto the porch steps and didn't say a single word. Aunt Ruth looked past my shoulder toward the house. Her voice was calm, precise, and absolutely audible to everyone on the street. "Does she know," she said, "that your father has called me every week for the past 12 years? Celeste reached us 30 seconds later. Ruth looked at her once, a quick, assessing look, and said, "Come inside." It wasn't a command. It was the kind of invitation you offer when you've already decided to trust someone. We sat in the back of the limousine with the door pulled shut. The street outside went on being a street. Ruth folded her hands and spoke the way people speak when they have been waiting a long time to say something clearly. "I was never in an accident," she said. "I have been living in Edinburgh for 12 years. I have a home there, a practice, a life. I am not dead. I have never been dead." She said it without drama. Just facts, placed down carefully one after another. "In 2013, your father and I were talking regularly, as we always had. I told him I was worried about him. I told him I'd noticed he was being kept from you, that the Moira he described on the phone sounded like someone being slowly removed from the family picture." She paused. "2 weeks after that conversation, your mother called every relative, every neighbor, every person in this family's orbit and told them I had died in a car accident outside Paris." Celeste was very still beside me. "Nobody verified it," Ruth continued. "Why would they? People don't verify death. They grieve and they move on and they stop saying your name." I was looking at my own hands. "Your father continued calling me, every week, without fail, from his office landline, from a payphone when the office was closed, from your neighbor's house once, when your mother was monitoring the phones at home." Ruth's voice remained level. "He told me everything, Moira, about every call of yours he missed, about the letters, about the young man you were seeing." "Josh," I said. The name came out flat. "Yes." "What about Josh?" She looked at me steadily. "Your mother spoke to him, before you two ended things." The air in the car was very still. I had told myself a story about Josh Coleman for almost 2 years. In that story, he had decided, on his own, for reasons that were his own, that he didn't want to be with someone like me. Quieter than expected. Working nights. A little hard to reach. I had accepted that story because it was easier than the alternative, that the ending had been arranged before I knew a negotiation was happening. Your mother met with him, Ruth said. I don't know the details. Your father only knew what Josh told him briefly, before Josh stopped coming around. But what your mother told him had to do with your hearing. She framed it as concern. She made it sound like something you had kept from him, a medical issue more significant than it was. Something that would require ongoing management. Something she was surprised he didn't already know about. Josh wasn't a bad person. He was 25, uncertain, and someone had handed him a reason to be afraid, wrapped in the language of caring. He wasn't cruel, I said, more to myself than to Ruth. No, she agreed. He was managed. I sat with that word. Celeste had her hands in her lap. Her paralegal's mind was doing what it always did, taking inventory, noting sequence, filing things in order of weight. I could see it in the stillness of her expression. The letters I sent my dad, I said, in college. Rerouted. Your mother set up a post office box years ago, mail addressed to your father from you went there. He never saw most of them. I didn't say anything for a moment. She did all of this, I said finally, to make me leave. Ruth held my gaze. She did all of this to make leaving feel like your own idea. There's a particular kind of anger that doesn't announce itself. It just settles in, quiet and total, like weather moving in from the west. That was what I felt. Okay, I need to step out of the story for just a second. What I just told you, about Josh, about the letters, about 12 years of phone calls made from borrowed phones. I know how it sounds. I know some of you are thinking, why didn't you figure this out sooner? Here's the honest answer. When you grow up being told, in 100 small ways, that your perception is off, you stop trusting it. You don't look for schemes. You just assume you're not enough. If that sentence hit something in you, if you've ever been made to feel like the problem was always somehow you, I want to hear about it. Leave a comment. Tell me what that looked like in your family. You might be surprised how many people are reading the same page. And one more thing before we go back. If you haven't subscribed yet and you're still here, I think that means something. The button is right there. Okay. Back to Maple Street. Because we were still sitting in that car, and I had a decision to make. Ruth let the silence stand for a moment. She was good at that, not filling space just to fill it. Then she asked simply, "What do you want to do?" I looked out through the tinted window. The party was still nominally happening. I could see shapes through the front window of the house. People standing, not quite sure whether to leave or stay. My mother was no longer visible on the porch. Someone had helped her inside. I thought about my father. Not about the 12 years of intercepted calls. Not about the letters. Not about Josh. I thought about this morning. The 2 cups of coffee on the back porch. The way he had started to tell me something, and then stood up when she said his name. The hand on my shoulder. I'm still here. He was still in that house. He had been in that house for a very long time. I want to go back in, I said. Not to fight. To talk to my dad. In front of people. Ruth didn't hesitate. Then I'll walk in with you. I looked at Celeste. She straightened her blouse. I'll stay just outside the door, in case anyone needs to recall later what was said. She said it the way you state a procedural fact. I almost smiled. I rebuttoned the top button of my jacket, a habit I have when I need to feel composed from the outside in. I thought about what I was walking back into. 20 people who had just watched my mother throw my card in the trash. 20 people who were now also processing the fact that the dead woman they'd been grieving for 12 years had just stepped out of a limousine on Maple Street. I was not going back in to win. I was going back in because my father had been trying to stand up for 30 minutes, and all he needed was someone to walk through the door first. The 3 of us walked back up Maple Street together. I was in front. Ruth was half a step behind my left shoulder. Celeste peeled off at the edge of the front path and positioned herself near the porch railing, present, visible, saying nothing. Brittany was standing in the doorway. She had one hand on the doorframe, and she was wearing the expression of someone who had been told to hold a position. Moira. Her voice was careful. Mom isn't feeling well. You should probably... I know, I said. I kept walking. Moira, this isn't... She stopped mid-sentence, because she had just seen the woman behind me. The color shifted in Brittany's face. Not fear exactly, more like a floor giving way somewhere below the surface. Her hand dropped from the doorframe. She stepped back without deciding to. We walked inside. The living room had rearranged itself into small clusters of people who weren't sure whether to stay or go. Linda Henderson was standing near the window. Patty Oakes was beside the fireplace, arms crossed, watching everything. The cousins were near the hallway, speaking quietly. Kevin Pierce was on the far couch, phone finally in his jacket pocket, eyes moving between faces, and my father was in the corner chair. He saw Ruth the moment we came through the door. He didn't stand gradually. He stood all at once, the way you stand when your body reacts before your mind has caught up. And the color in his face did something I had never seen before. Something that looked like 12 years' worth of grief releasing all at once. Ruth, he said. Just her name. His voice broke on it. She walked straight to him, put her arms around him. And my father, who had been taught to sit down for so long, leaned his head against his younger sister's shoulder and cried without making a sound. Nobody in the room said anything. There was nothing to say. My mother was seated on the sofa. Someone had brought her a glass of water, and she was holding it with both hands, the performance of being overwhelmed. I had seen that posture before. It was the posture she used when a situation had slipped out of her control and she needed to reframe it before anyone else did. She looked up when Ruth stepped back from my father. Her voice was soft, almost trembling, the voice she reserved for rooms with witnesses. Ruth, I had no idea. Someone told us there had been an accident. I never would have. You have to believe me. I thought you were... Sandra. Ruth turned from my father. She spoke with the quiet, settled clarity of someone who has rehearsed nothing and needs to rehearse nothing, because she simply knows what is true. Dale called me every week for 12 years. From the office landline, from the corner payphone on Birchwood, from the Pattersons' home on 2 separate occasions. She paused. You knew every one of those phones was available to him. You did not monitor them because you assumed I was gone. The room had gone very still. I am not gone, Ruth said. My mother's expression shifted. The soft trembling recalibrated into something harder underneath. Ruth, this is not the time or the place to... When would be better? Silence. Patty Oakes, who had been standing near the fireplace with her arms crossed, uncrossed them. She set her coffee cup down on the mantel with a small, deliberate click. She looked at my mother for a long moment. The long look of someone who has known you for 20 years and is presently revising every assumption that created. Sandra, Patty said, I think Ruth deserves an answer. My mother looked at her oldest friend, and for the first time I had ever witnessed, Sandra Calloway had nothing ready. My father wiped his eyes once with the back of his hand. He stood straight. Something had changed in him in the last 4 minutes. Or maybe it hadn't changed. Maybe it had just become visible. He looked like a man who had been carrying a weight so long he'd stopped noticing it and had only just now set it down to see how heavy it actually was. He turned to face the room, not dramatically, just deliberately. The way a man faces something he has been preparing for without knowing he was preparing. I want to say one thing. His voice was steady. I want to say it while people are here, because I've been saying it in my head for a long time, and I need it to be witnessed. My mother said, Dale. Sandra. He looked at her without anger, without performance, just directly. Please let me finish. She closed her mouth. He turned toward me. Moira. You called me 47 times in the last 18 months. I know because I counted every one I missed on the caller ID in my office. The phone she didn't think to check. He paused. I never stopped being your father. I want you to know that. Linda Henderson put her hand over her mouth. Gary looked at the floor. My father continued. I don't know every detail of what Ruth has said today, but I know that my sister has been alive for 12 years and I was told she wasn't. That is a fact, and that fact has a source. He didn't say my mother's name. He didn't have to. Every person in the room understood the sentence he had chosen not to complete. Brittany was standing near the far wall. I watched something cross her face. Not shock. Something older than shock. Recognition. In the hallway behind us, a clock ticked. Twice. Then the room held its breath. My father sat down. Not because he was done, because he wanted to say the rest of it slowly, the way something important deserves to be said, without the wobble of a man standing on uncertain ground. I've been in this house for 31 years, he said. And for the last 12 of them, I have lived with a lie I was told to believe and did not have the means to disprove. He looked at his hands. That's on me, part of it. I know that. He looked up. But I also know what happened when I tried to call Moira from this house. I know what happened when her letters stopped coming. I know why I started using the payphone on Birchwood on Tuesday mornings. I told myself there were explanations, that things had just drifted. Families drift. He shook his head once. They don't drift this precisely. Patty Oakes was sitting down now. She had pulled a chair over without anyone noticing and sat in it like a person settling in for the full account. My mother had not spoken in several minutes. She was still holding the water glass. The ice in it had melted. My father looked at Sandra. I am not going to say the rest of this to you privately, he said. I've said too much privately. I've let too much happen privately. He set his coffee mug on the side table. From here on, anything that concerns my daughter, or my sister, or this family, gets said in the open. He looked at me then, just at me. Moira. His voice was quiet. I'm sorry it took me this long to say any of this out loud. I looked at my father, this man I had driven 20 minutes each way to sit with on a porch, just to be near him for 10 minutes before someone interrupted, and I nodded. Once. That was enough. Ruth stood in the center of the room the way she must have stood in front of clients for 30 years. Unhurried, clear, taking up exactly the space she needed, and not 1 inch more. I want to be brief, she said. And I want to be plain, because I think plain is what this room needs right now. She addressed the room, not my mother, not my father, but the room, the Hendersons, Patty, the cousins near the hallway, Kevin Pierce, who had both feet flat on the floor now and was paying full attention for the first time all afternoon. My name is Ruth Hargrove. I am Dale Calloway's younger sister. I have been living and working in Edinburgh, Scotland for 12 years. I hold a current passport. I have a mortgage, a studio, clients on 3 continents, and a very reliable phone line. She let that sit for 1 beat. I am not dead. The story of my death was distributed to this family and this community by one person, following a conversation in which I expressed concern to my brother about the health of his relationship with his younger daughter. That concern was apparently inconvenient. Patty Oakes made a small sound. Not a word. Just an exhale. I am not here to pursue anything legal, Ruth continued. I am here because Dale asked me to come. I am here because Moira deserved to know that the people in her life who seemed to disappear did not all disappear by choice. That sentence landed the way it was meant to land. Josh, the letters, the missed calls, the coffee cups going cold, every absence that Moira had been told was ordinary, was absence that had been engineered. Patty stood up. She looked at my mother, not with fury, with something heavier than fury. Sandra, she said, you need to explain this to me. My mother said nothing. My mother stood up from the sofa. She stood up the way someone stands when they realize the frame they've built around themselves has come down, and they're trying to find a new one fast enough that no one notices the scramble. You don't understand what it was like, Her voice was no longer the one she used for company. It was thinner, more tired. I was trying to hold this family together. I was trying to keep things from falling apart. Ruth was filling Dale's head with, she was making him doubt everything. She was, Sandra. Ruth's voice was not raised. It didn't need to be. That sentence is not a defense. My mother looked at Brittany, the look of someone reaching for backup. Brittany was standing against the far wall with her arms folded, not defensively, but like someone holding themselves in. She looked at her mother. Then she looked at the floor. "Mom," she said quietly. "Enough." Kevin put a hand on Brittany's shoulder. It was the most present I'd seen him all day. My mother turned to me. I walked toward her, not close enough to be confrontational, close enough to be heard without raising my voice. "I'm not here to take anything from you," I said. "I'm not angry in the way you might be expecting." I kept my voice even. "But I want to be clear about what happens next. Starting today, I contact my father directly. His number, his schedule, his choice. If that gets in the way, I'll ask Celeste to help me understand what my options are." I paused. Let that settle. "I don't hate you, but I am done trying to earn something you've never been willing to give." My mother looked at me for a long moment. She did not speak. That was, in its own way, the first honest thing she'd offered all day. I turned toward the end table. The trash can was still there, a small wicker one my mother kept beside the sofa for neatly discarded things. The card was inside it, face down, half covered by a folded paper napkin. I reached in and took it out. I turned it over in my hands. The photograph was intact. One corner had bent slightly. I smoothed it with my thumb. My mother at 30-something in the backyard, head tipped back, laughing at something just out of frame. A small girl in a yellow butterfly dress reaching toward her with both hands. My father crossed the room. He stood beside me and looked at the photograph for a long moment without speaking. When he did speak, his voice was low and careful. The voice of someone who has located something they thought was lost. "I remember that day," he said. "You were trying to catch an actual butterfly. You'd been chasing the same one for 20 minutes. A brief pause. You were wearing that dress all afternoon because you thought the butterflies on it might attract the real ones." I looked at him. He raised his hand and touched the top of my head, lightly. The way you do with someone you've known since they were small, when the gesture says everything the words can't quite carry. "I'm sorry, Moira," he said. "I let it go on too long." I didn't tell him it was okay. It wasn't entirely okay, and we both knew that, and the honesty of not saying otherwise felt more respectful than comfort would have. "We'll figure out the rest," I said. He nodded. Around us, the room was quietly coming apart. Coats were being retrieved. Voices were low. Patty Oakes paused near me on her way to the door. She looked at the photograph in my hand. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The afternoon light was coming through the front windows now, slow and warm and indifferent to everything that had just happened in it. The house emptied in less than 20 minutes. Nobody made a formal announcement. Nobody said the party was over. People simply collected their things. Coats from the bedroom, casserole dishes from the kitchen counter, purses from the chair by the door, and left in the quiet, deliberate way that people leave when they have witnessed something they need time to process before they can speak about it. Linda Henderson hugged my father on her way out. Said nothing. Just held his arm for a moment and nodded once. Gary shook Dale's hand. The cousins filed out with murmured goodbyes. Kevin said he was going to bring the car around. Brittany told him she'd be out in a minute. Patty Oakes was the last to go. She stood in the doorway with her dish under her arm and looked at my mother, who had moved to the armchair in the corner and was sitting with her hands folded in her lap, staring at nothing in particular. Patty's expression was not cruel. It was the expression of someone doing arithmetic they'd rather not have had to do. She said nothing. She turned and walked down the porch steps and up the street toward her car. My mother watched her go. Then she stood, walked down the hall, and closed the bedroom door behind her without a word. Brittany sat down at the kitchen table, alone. She rested her elbows on the tabletop and put her face in her hands, not crying, not that I could see, just holding herself very still. Ruth and Celeste moved to the back porch without discussing it, the way people find space after something large. My father and I stayed where we were for a while, in the living room, among the cleared-away cups and the folded napkins and the square of afternoon light on the floor. Just being in the same room, finishing something. My father excused himself to take his evening medication, the real medication, on his own schedule, not my mother's. That left Brittany and me. She was still at the kitchen table when I came through the doorway. She looked up. She had the expression of someone who has been composing an opening sentence for several minutes and discarded each one. I sat down across from her. The kitchen clock ticked. Outside, Kevin was idling in the car. Neither of us acknowledged the sound. "I don't know where to start," Brittany said. "You don't have to start anywhere." I knew she wasn't being fair to you. She said it to the table, not to me. "I've known for a long time." "I know you knew." She looked up at that. "Then why did you keep coming back?" "Because of Dad." I said it without heat. It was always because of Dad. She was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. "I didn't do anything because I was afraid that if I sided with you, I'd lose her. And she was all I—" She stopped. Reconsidered the sentence. "She was the version of her that I needed, and I knew that if I questioned her, she'd take that away." I understood what she was describing. I understood it more than she probably realized. "That's not an excuse," she added quickly. "No," I said. "But it's a reason. There's a difference." She nodded, looked at her hands. "If you don't show up empty-handed," she said softly, quoting our mother back at us, the instruction from the phone call 3 weeks ago. "She sees it as competition. She runs it that way on purpose." "I know," I said. "I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner." I looked at her across the table. My sister, who I had grown up beside and grown up apart from simultaneously. "Start from now," I said. "That's all I'm asking." I want to step outside the story one more time, just for a moment. A lot of people ask me, "Did you forgive your mother?" Here's what I'll tell you. Forgiveness, for me, is something I work on privately. It's mine, it's for me, it doesn't require anything from her. But a boundary is different. A boundary is something you hand to another person as information. It says, "This is where I end, and you begin." Those are two separate things. I think we collapse them all the time, and that collapsing costs people a lot. So here's my question for you. And I mean this genuinely. If you were standing in that doorway, looking at the person who hurt you, what would you actually say? Not what you should say. What you would actually say. Tell me in the comments. I read them. More than you might think. Okay. We're almost at the end of the story, and I promise, the last part matters. I was getting ready to leave, jacket back on, card tucked carefully into my inside pocket, when my mother came out of the bedroom. She looked different in a way that was hard to name. Her hair wasn't fixed. She'd changed out of the blue dress and into a cardigan. Without the dressed-up version of herself to stand behind, she looked like a woman in her mid-50s who was very tired and had been for a long time. She stood in the kitchen doorway. Ruth was in the dining room with my father. Celeste was near the front door. My mother looked at me. Not with the expression she'd used earlier, the one that was composed for an audience, just directly, a little hollowed out. "I'm not going to apologize," she said, "for most of it. I want you to know that." I waited. "But I know what I did." She said those 4 words in a different tone from the rest. Less defended. More like something factual she'd finally stopped arguing with. "I know all of it." I looked at her for a moment. "Thank you for saying that," I said. "That's the first honest thing I can remember you telling me." She didn't react to that. Maybe it landed, maybe it didn't. I'll never know for certain, and I've made a certain peace with not knowing. I picked up my bag, hugged my father, hugged Ruth, touched Celeste's arm, walked to the front door. Outside in the car, Celeste didn't start the engine right away. She let the quiet sit. Then, "You okay?" I thought about it. Not quickly, honestly. "Yeah," I said. "I think, for the first time in a while, I actually am." She started the car. We drove down Maple Street in the late afternoon light, past the tulips, past the limousine still parked at the curb, past all of it. I did not look back. 3 weeks later, my phone rang on a Sunday morning at 10 o'clock. I was in my kitchen making coffee. The number on the screen was one I didn't recognize at first. Then I realized I'd never seen my father's cell phone number before, because my father had never had one. Ruth had bought it for him before she flew back to Edinburgh. A simple smartphone, prepaid, set up in his name. I picked up. "Morning," he said. He sounded slightly uncertain about the device. I could hear him holding it too close. But underneath that, something easy. Something that hadn't been in his voice the last few times I'd seen him in that house. We talked for 32 minutes. He asked about the ICU. I told him about a patient who had been discharged that week after a long stay, and how the whole floor had stood in the hallway when she walked out. He said, "That's a good job, Moira." Not congratulatory, just certain. Like he'd always known it and was glad to finally say it out loud. I visited 2 weeks later, a Tuesday, my day off, at a time I chose. When I arrived, my mother was home. She went into the bedroom when she heard me come in. My father and I sat on the back porch. He made 2 cups of coffee. We stayed out there for an hour and 20 minutes. No one came to interrupt us. I still have the photograph in my wallet. The corner is still slightly bent. I've decided not to fix it. The fallout was quiet. That's the nature of small towns. Things don't explode, they cool. Patty Oakes called my mother 3 weeks after Mother's Day. A short call. "Checking in," she said. After that, her name stopped appearing on the kitchen calendar where my mother kept her social engagements. I noticed the blank Saturdays when I visited. I didn't ask about them. The Hendersons didn't invite my parents to their 4th of July cookout. They'd held that cookout every year for 11 years. They had my father's number now. Ruth had made sure of that. And Gary texted him separately to say he was sorry about all of it, and that he and Linda were glad Ruth was okay. My father texted back a single sentence: "Thank you for being there." For Brittany, the reckoning was slower and more personal. She and Kevin started seeing a therapist together, not because of one afternoon, but because that afternoon had clarified something that had been sitting underneath their marriage for years. Kevin, it turned out, had opinions. He'd just been waiting to find out if he was allowed to have them. Brittany texted me 17 days after Mother's Day. I read it, set the phone down, thought about it for 3 days, and wrote back. 2 sentences. "Okay, start from here." She replied in one. "Thank you. We're not close yet. We might not be for a long time. But the line is open, and we're both leaving it open. And in a family like ours, that is not a small thing." I'm on break in the ICU staff room when I think about it most clearly. 3 in the morning usually. The hospital is quiet. The particular quiet of a building where everything has been reduced to what actually matters. No performance, no audience, just the work. My father called me that Sunday. 32 minutes. We talked about nothing that would look important written down. I took the photograph out of my wallet and looked at it for a while. That version of my mother, laughing in the backyard. The girl in the butterfly dress reaching toward her. I don't know what happened to the woman in that photograph. Maybe she was always going to become what she became. Maybe there was a version of events where she didn't. I'm not the right person to sort that out. That's hers to carry, and I've stopped trying to carry it for her. What I know is this. I spent a very long time trying to become someone my mother could be proud of. Not someone I was proud of, someone she was proud of. Those are different projects, and I'd been confusing them since I was old enough to know she was watching. I'm not doing that anymore. I put the photograph back, finished my coffee, went back to work. There's a certain kind of strength that doesn't announce itself, that doesn't need to. It just shows up, shift after shift, doing what it does. I think I've spent the last 4 years building it without realizing that's what I was doing. I think I'm going to keep building it. 6 weeks after Mother's Day, my phone rang on a Tuesday afternoon. Unknown international number. Scotland code. I answered. It's Ruth. A pause. The small click of an overseas line. I just wanted to make sure you were all right. I was standing at the window in my apartment with a cup of tea, looking out at a street that had nothing remarkable on it, just an ordinary Tuesday, ordinary light. I'm good, I said. I'm actually good. Your father says you've been talking every Sunday. We have. A brief, warm silence. That's all I needed to know, she said. I stayed at the window after we hung up, not thinking about anything in particular, just standing there, in my own apartment, in my own life, which was, improbably, turning out to be mine. That's the whole story. If any part of it sounded familiar, if you've ever sat at a table and felt like the guest in your own family, I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments what you would have done. Tell me what you did do. Tell me what you wish someone had said to you. If this story meant something to you, the like button is right there. And if you want to hear another one, I've left a link in the description to a story I think you'll want to stay for. I'll see you there.